afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us tonight. The first note is going to be live broadcast from YouTube, our program. It's a great pleasure to open this timely and important discussion in the world of World Press Freedom Day, which we mark every year on the 3rd of May. We should always remember the important role of journalism in promoting democracy and accountability, not just for only on the 3rd of May, but throughout the years. Today's panel is about press freedom in the digital age and why protecting the free media is more urgent than ever. As speakers, we have Renata Schroeder, I think she's going to be here in a few minutes, Karl van den Broek, Lailuna Sadid, Ahmet Kemal Ziyada, and Abdullah Bozkurt. And we have a video message from Irena Yilberova, Slovenian MEP from Vrije Group, who contributed so much on the discussions of European Media Freedom Act last year. But before we begin the discussion, I would like to say a few words on today's topic as an introduction. As a journalist whose newspaper has been brutally confiscated by the Erdogan regime in Turkey, and whose many of his colleagues are still languishing behind bars, I cannot underline enough the importance of free media. We say that free media is a pillar of democracy. There is a simple logic behind it. If you, as a citizen, are not well informed about public policies, you cannot make free and well-informed decisions at elections. And if citizens are not informed, democracy cannot function. That's why a free and independent press is not a luxury, it's a cornerstone of any democratic society. But today, we are seeing increasing efforts by governments to control the media space. Authoritarian and populist governments start dismantling democracy by first attacking the free media. Governments do this in two ways. First, by suppressing critical and independent journalists, using surveillance, threats, censorship, or legal actions. Second, by consolidating pro-government media through biased funding, political appointments, and control over public broadcasters. Examples are all around us. In Hungary, government-linked outlets receive the vast majority of public advertising. In Slovakia, the public broadcaster has recently been dismantled and replaced. Even in Italy, one of the founding members of the European Union, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, goes after journalists whose stories criticize her or her government. And there are many more examples in the European Union. But beyond the European Union, the situation seems more problematic. In Afghanistan, the Taliban regime treats freedom of speech as an alien, subversive idea. Journalists face imprisonment or worse for simply reporting facts. In Egypt, independent media has been crushed. Opposition voices are silenced through arrests, intimidation, and state control of broadcasting. In Turkey, where 90% of the media is owned by government cronies, journalism is permitted only within the red lines drawn by the state. Investigating human rights abuses, corruption, or government mismanagement can cost you your freedom and your career. There are still too many journalists behind the bars. Some of them are almost forgotten. Today, I want to remember and remind two of them who are behind the bars almost for 10 years. Their names are Hidayet Karaca and Ali Ünal. Mr. Karaca has been imprisoned for life for giving subliminal messages through TV series. And we know that those who had to flee their country face transnational repression of the governments abroad. Our distinguished speakers will share their personal experiences. As is today's topic, these practices have been adapted to the digital age. Online media, once a symbol of freedom, is now a new battlefield. Governments use spyware to monitor reporters, algorithms to manipulate visibility, and platform rules to silence dissent. The European Union has taken action to protect journalists and to ensure media pluralism by the European Media Freedom Act, adopted last year at the European Parliament, and will be fully applicable by August. There is also an anti-SLAPP directive to protect journalists from arbitrary legal actions. These protections are still growing in the EU and across the globe. So today, we ask, what does press freedom mean in the digital era? How do we push back against censorship, surveillance, and media capture, whether at home or abroad? Our distinguished speakers will talk about these important questions, bringing legal, journalistic, and human rights perspectives to the table. We can now listen to Mr. Lueva's words on the video message. Thank you.
Dear all, thank you for having me on the Press Freedom Day. I'm sorry I could not be there with you, but I really do hope that this video recording will be a good substitute. The situation right now for press freedom is dire. Challenges are building up. Political situation is different. Last mandate we managed to adopt very good European Media Freedom Act, and with it we got legally binding safeguards throughout the European Union. It remains to be seen how it works in practice, and enforcement will be key. From position of power, there are always tendencies to subdue the media, capture it, influence it, manipulate the people for their own political gain. It takes strong institutional safeguards and developed political culture to prevent it, and without press freedom, our democracies cannot function. You only become aware of the freedom once you lose it. And once you lose it, it's really hard to regain it. Both private and public media are constantly under pressure, including in many member states of the European Union. When we were drafting the European Media Freedom Act, there was a crucial question how to protect journalists from undue pressure. And the best solution we came up with is to give power to the journalists themselves and legally recognize their work as a public good. Themselves to have tools to fight for their independence. Public media is usually the first target from populists and autocrats. It happened in Poland during peace government, it happened in Hungary, and it happened in Slovakia. But private media is also very susceptible to political capture, and this isn't limited to Eastern Europe, but it's happening all over Europe, using state advertising to enrich pro-government outlets for favorable reporting, oligarchs buying respectable media outlets and change editorial policy overnight. Most radical examples are even to use the power of the state to suppress what is left of critical media. What happened in Hungary, and even worse in Russia and Belarus. I will outline just a couple of important points for European Media Freedom Act enforcement and implementations, and what needs to be next steps going beyond this law. With journalists having the tools to protect their own freedom, I meant especially Article 6, which guarantees their independence, but to see it in practice, we need to have some lawsuits filed in the courts. Basically, anytime a publisher wants to limit the freedom, change editorial decision, it can be challenged in court. This complements go well with full transparency of ownership of media and advertising money flowing to media. Public media has also a special Article 5, and it's not yet in force, which is a shame because it didn't prevent political capture in Slovakia, otherwise it would. For any legislative measures trying to limit freedom of private media outlets, there is a legal base in Article 21. First, the pressure should build for member states to adapt their legislation and prepare for the implementation of the EMFA. Secondly, we need to see enforcement filing lawsuits not just from the European Commission, but also private companies, journalists and editors. The whole structure was based on this. My guide was that nobody else can decide on the autonomy and independence than journalists in newsrooms themselves. This is why we wanted to build on the structure of the board, which will be now advised by advisory groups representing journalists and editors who know best where the problems are. I would say all of this is, the first step, but looking further, we have to tackle the issue with media outlets struggling on the market. There are very few percentages of people willing to pay professional media. The advertising money, important source of revenues, goes to tech giants. Amazon, for example, receives more than all media companies combined. Thirdly, many people receive their news from social platforms where fake news, disinformation are widespread, and manipulation is easily done with a couple of hundreds or thousands euros. The best antidote is professional media, but it needs to reach the population. And fourthly, AI systems present additional threats, and currently we have a dilemma. Where do these systems learn? AI companies can make deals with media companies for content, but there are no established legal frameworks how to make this fair. Large media companies are in big advantage comparing to smaller ones, accommodating smaller languages. Think about how these AI systems learn, where they take the information and how are the newsrooms producing this compensated. This, I think, will be the next big topic. And with failed attempts to force the tech giants to pay for content, we might miss the second big opportunity to create predictable and balanced systems between the parties. Free media is and will always be the cornerstone of our democratic societies. We were always too late to tackle the issue, as ENFA also came too late. It's a lot easier to defend press freedom than to restore it. And in the end, it's the culture, the credibility and professionalism of journalists who make it happen. Let's nurture this part of public good.
Thank you, Ms. Yoeva. We have a small change in schedule. Ahmed Jamal Ziada has to leave at 3, so we will first give the floor to him. Please, Ahmed.
Thank you so much. Yes, I am University. So I'm sorry for that. So thank you. So my name is Ahmed Ghaziana. I'm an investigative journalist from Egypt, and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Zawiya, which translated into third angle. And we focus on our work on corruption and human rights, economic politics, and we cover all of Egypt. We have around 27 journalists in every area in Egypt. And so I will start, first of all, why I'm here in Belgium. I actually went to Belgium in 2020. I was here for advocacy, to advocate for freedom of press. Then I couldn't come back because I knew that the regime of Egypt cased a file against me. If I go back to Egypt, I will go to jail. So I decided to stay here. And since I already went to jail twice in Egypt, once was a year and a half, and the second I disappeared, I kidnapped and disappeared for 15 days. No one knows anything about me. And it was actually from a work. It was hard to decide that I should stay in Belgium. I mean, I didn't know anything about this country, even I don't speak French or Dutch. So it was a really hard decision, and I was somehow lost what to do because I never did anything in my life but journalism. So, and it's really hard that you are here in Belgium that because you have a dream, which starts in investigative platform, and now you stopped. You cannot come back. My colleagues in Egypt, the 27 journalists that work for our platform now, they were waiting for me to come back to Egypt. So we started this project, and so it was struggling. And I was just at the very beginning didn't know what to do, and I was working as a delivery man. I was delivering food, and then I just decided to, inside myself, to say that I'm not victim, I'm just a journalist, and I can do my work in Egypt or out of Egypt. So I started to come back to work with the Middle East Eye and Al Jazeera, started to be a freelancer, plus my work as a delivery man in order to establish this platform with this small budget that I was taking from Middle East or Al Jazeera or as a delivery man. And then I was paying to, collecting some money to start this platform. It was crazy because no one believed even from the donors that meet me at the very beginning that we can do something, when you are exiled, you cannot come back to the country, so how come you will collect information and work as you were working in Egypt? So we already started, the 27 journalists, we started without any money. If anyone can pay something, we were doing that. Until we actually started with investigation about Palestinian people that were crossing from Gaza to Egypt, and they were paying money to the authority. It was our very first big investigation, and then we found ourselves in the middle of covering news in Egypt. We found Guardian contact us to take some information, and we started a partnership with UCCRP, which is a very trusted organization for investigative journalists around the world. And then donors finally believe that we can do something. So we set our money, small budget. We did our best, and now I think people in Egypt follow us in everywhere. And we are one of the most important platforms in Egypt now. We cover everywhere, and even the UNESCO put our platform in their report as a resource, a trusted resource. And at the end we are blocked in Egypt because the authority of Egypt, the author of this platform, they found many investigative journalists work for us, and we actually have a goal that to change the narrative of the journalists in Egypt. So it's really can be dangerous on such a regime that doesn't believe in democracy or freedom or arresting journalists every day. So they blocked us twice, our main platform, and now we are trying to find another way to reach people. And we created something called Mirror. It's something, technically it's complicated. So you put your website in Google, and it somehow will be very complicated to the authority of Egypt to block this Mirror, because if they block it, they will block Google, which is really, they will lose money because it's really risky on them. And now we are trying to find another way, which is creating application with the VPN inside this application in order to allow everyone in Egypt can access the content that we publish. And it's somehow working right now. And that's the situation. That's how it works in Egypt. And that's all my story.
Okay, Ahmed, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Ahmed? No, maybe I can ask you one. How do you assess the European Union position vis-à-vis media freedom in Egypt?
So, it's a very complicated question. I have actually a problem with the system of supporting journalism in the EU. And I'm going to be so honest on that. At the very beginning I was struggling because they actually believe that I'm just a victim and they should support me, they should train me. As a journalist, I should learn more, and it doesn't work like that because, someone who's working as a leader in journalism in Egypt doesn't need any training. So what we need from the EU, for example, as journalists in Egypt, is just, support us, because you guys support freedom and democracy, and in the same time, you support the regime of Egypt. So it's really complicated, and what we need from the EU, it's just support journalists to work, to continue the work, to push Egypt, because you can't do that. EU actually, in many situations, they supported many journalists, and they were able to release journalists, even human rights defenders, like EU, many times asked Egypt to release human rights defenders, and they did well because in the end, they released them. So. Yeah, so I would say we are not just victims, we are professional journalists, and you should deal with us like that.
Thank you. Our second speaker today is Karl van den Broek. Mr. van den Broek is a seasoned Belgian journalist, editor-in-chief of Apache.be, a platform for independent investigative journalism. He has led major publications like KNAK and continues to advocate for press freedom and journalistic integrity. In this panel, we will talk about investigative journalism in the age of algorithms. Please.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm having a cold, so excuse my voice. I would just like to tell a little history about how Apache, which is the name of our platform, came into being. We were founded in 2009, when the world was still without Facebook and without Twitter, and even without smartphones. You couldn't consult the internet on your phone at that point. We didn't have any business model. We just had this blog, and people could read everything we published, and the people that wrote for Apache, they lived on their own resources. So it was an experiment, because it was one of the first digital platforms in Flanders, the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, and for us it was exciting because the internet gave us the opportunity to publish journalism at a very low cost. I've worked for newspapers and magazines, and more than half of the revenue you get goes to the printer and to the distribution of your paper outlet. So with the internet brought a lot of enthusiasm and dreams of how media could be much more accessible. The means of production in the media sector will become much more democratic. But if we are now 16 years later, and the world has changed dramatically, and the internet has of course provided a lot of good things. My colleague next to me just proved that without the internet he wouldn't be able to publish, or wouldn't be able to reach the audience in music. But on the other hand, the internet is dominated by big media corporations that set the agenda, that control what we read, what we don't read on Facebook, on the social media platforms. And on the other hand, and this was also said already today, these big media corporations like Amazon, like Mega, etc., like Google, they sucked away all the advertising income from the media sector. So it was this kind of perfect storm in the beginning of 2010 and a few years later, that newspapers who were trying to achieve this dream of becoming free, because you don't have to pay for a newspaper anymore, you have a lot of free newspapers also, or very cheap, because advertising would pay for everything. That was the dream in 2010, newspapers would be free. So people, and also when they developed their websites, the content of these websites was free. There were no paywalls, or there were very cheap paywalls. But then the big media tech companies took away, or sucked away all the publicity income, and the entire system collapsed. So a lot of newspapers went bankrupt, also television stations, etc. And now, it was a number that I didn't know that Amazon makes more profit than all the other media companies in the world, but it sums it up. It's a good example of what's going wrong. On the other hand, the media corporations are now becoming bigger. In Flanders, we only have two and a big and a small one. We control all newspapers, not only in Flanders but also in Holland. They bought all the Dutch newspapers as well. And they built this their digital platforms with radio, with internet, with video, with television, also to only achieve one goal. They have to compete with Facebook and the others, and that means that they will have to build profiles of their users, of their readers, their listeners, their viewers, and sell these profiles to companies for publicity. That's what Facebook does. Facebook is free. We are free on Facebook, and we never asked ourselves the question, why is this wonderful tool like Facebook is wonderful? You can reach people all over the world for free. You can put your photos on it, and you never have to pay for it. But of course, you paid with your own identity. You paid with your soul. Facebook knows everything about you. And the traditional media corporations are following that strategy. They're also spying on their readers. They're just gathering all the information you get. What, especially of course of your consumption pattern, what you eat, what you drink, how you dress, where you go on holiday, but also your political views, also your sexual appetite. They know everything about you. And in a democracy, that might be okay. If there are strict rules on privacy, there are strict rules about how this information can be used. Because if your insurance company knows everything about your health issues, because you just buy it from Megan, it's terrifying. But on the other hand, and that's something that's happening now in the United States, if this enormous amount of information on individuals, which is now in the hands of Elon Musk and his Zuckerberg and his colleagues, is combined with the information that the state already has on us, with all the databases that are in the tax administration, medical files, etc. And you can combine that, then you have a big brother that George Orwell wouldn't even think about. It's a monster. So that's the situation we're in now. And how can you fight that? You can fight that by not giving in to this business model. So that means that you have to convince people again that they have to pay for journalism. And maybe eventually we have to find ways that people who don't have a lot of money can still have access to media. My company is a corporation, we're a corporation. You can be compared with a corporation in agriculture, people putting their crops together and selling their wine, etc. It's an old system. We're a company and we have 2,000 owners. And in a corporation there is one rule, you can buy as many shares you want, but you only have one vote in the General Assembly. So nobody can buy Apache. Only if you can convince the half of our readers to follow you, then maybe you can buy Apache. Only the readers can buy Apache. Which gives a lot of relief and which makes us very confident, because most of the other outlets are controlled by rich families, rich media tycoons, and they are a victim of the whims of one person who can change everything. The people who work for the magazine or the newspaper, the editorial line, the ideology behind the newspaper, and is mostly controlled by one or two people. In our system, that's not the case. We have 2,000 civilians who want independent investigative journalism, and they hire journalists to do that. And I'm editor-in-chief, and it's my responsibility to make the editorial staff. It's not the responsibility of the owners, which gives a lot of rest and comfort for the way we work. And on the other hand, we also have 90% of our revenue, or 80% depends on subscriptions. And the rest comes from grants, maybe sometimes a small subsidy from wherever, from Europe or from Belgium or French authorities. But we try to have this mixed means of income. And I always refer to the ideas of Julia Cagé, which is the wife of Thomas Piketty. And she had her degree in the United States on media, and she wrote this wonderful pamphlet, which is based on her thesis, called Sauver les médias, Save the Media. And she said you should finance media in the same way that American universities are financed. So they get a small subsidy, which is now under stress because Trump is taking away the money. But that's not their only source of income. You have to pay to study there, so this is a transaction, like you pay for a newspaper in the newsstand. They have also research they do others, for companies, so they have this also source of income because they lend their services to society or any society basically. And then of course there is this huge source of income coming from alumni, from interest groups, from what we call in Dutch the Middenveld, the organized society, civil society. And I think this is a robust way that we should really finance media like that. So if one of these sources of income falls out or is taken away, you're still not dependent on it. See what happened now when there was a lot of money going into media, in independent media in Eastern Europe, etc. that came from the United States. Now it's all gone. And I'm very worried of what's going to happen with these media. So for me, I think we should be aware that the business model that media are having now is going to kill media and press freedom because they're buying our attention, they're buying what our taste, and that means that their first aim is not to publish the truth, to reveal things that stay hidden, or to inform citizens, as you told in your introductions, so that they can make a good choice when they go and cast their vote in the ballot. No, their only aim is to gather as much information they can from us and sell it to advertisers. That's their only aim, because that's their business model. And that has nothing to do with press freedom anymore. So I think in Belgium, we are not under threat by, not yet, by a government that is attacking media, although public media in Wallonia and in Flanders are under a lot of pressure. But still, it's not to be compared with what's happening in other countries. But the biggest threat is that the government is allowing these media companies to become bigger and bigger and bigger, regardless of the laws that exist on monopolies, etc. And we should have much strict rules on how much power and how much the pluriformity of the media should be guarded more closely, because that's the key to press freedom, of course.
Thank you very much, Karl. Our third speaker, excuse me, today is Renata Schroeder. Ms. Schroeder is the director of European Federation of Journalists, where she works to defend press freedom, media diversity, and the rights of journalists across Europe. She has been a strong voice at both the EU and Council of Europe, helping shape key policies like the European Media Freedom Act. In this panel, she will speak on the changing face of journalism, defending press freedom in the digital era. Please.
Thank you very much, and excuse me being late. I'm today running from one meeting to the other. Actually, this morning I was in the working group of the European Parliament on the European Media Freedom Act. I think you started talking about it, and also your colleague. And I won't talk about that because otherwise I would talk now for more than an hour, and this is not the idea today. More and more journalists today are attacked because they are journalists. And these attacks, and we've heard them already, are multifold, and I will outline some of them in a minute before proposing also some solutions. As you said, I'm Renate Schröder, working for the European Federation of Journalists, which is a federation of journalist unions and associations, and we have members in all EU member states, but actually extending to the Council of Europe, and media in exile from Belarus and from Russia. So the discussion on media in exile is also very important for us. I guess we also have this meeting today because we just had the World Press Freedom Day, so at least there is one day in the year where either politicians are doing some lip servicing or people realize actually it's really not going that well with journalism, because we do not only have these great examples like Apache, which we always like to showcase as best practice, and every year it's getting worse. And of course, this last year, because of what's happening in the United States, had a huge impact on the situation of journalists all throughout the world, actually, for the reasons which were already expressed. So we express our solidarity with all the journalists, all the media professionals who face threats, who face intimidation, attacks for their work. In these challenging times of social-political turmoil in Europe and beyond, indeed, public interest journalism is more crucial than ever as journalists continue to work under increasing pressure. And as we just heard, we have a sort of extremely toxic information ecosystem out there, which is, exactly as you said, dominated by attention. And we know that lies and toxic news are more attractive than boring facts. We have called more than ever for decisive action by the European Union, its member states and candidate countries to uphold and protect media freedom. To be perfectly honest, and I've been here for over 30 years, and the last 5 years I really felt it was the first time the European Commission woke up by coming up with regulation, the Digital Service Act, the Digital Markets Act, the AI Act, and finally the European Media Freedom Act, but also anti-SLAPP, so regulation against ferocious lawsuits, whatever. This new commission, which is very much under the guidance of President von der Leyen, of course it's also living in different times, but we are very concerned that defense union, rearming Europe, seems to be much more important than democratical standards and values. We keep saying there is no security without media freedom, and some people sort of look at us and say, yeah, you're right, but we don't know how that will turn into policies. I just give you, for examples, over the past year, we have seen a sharp rise in the complex and multifaceted challenges undermining the resilience of Europe's media landscape. These serious threats include the rise of political polarization, disinformation, far-right influence, political pressure, reduction of funding, growing attempts to restrict or even control independent reporting under the pretext of national security, what I just said. These factors play immense pressure on the media and increase uncertainty for many journalists. I just had our broadcasting expert group, and we discussed the increasing challenges on public service media. Either they are cut to a way that journalism is not possible anymore, or they are politically captured, as we have now, including in founding member states like Italy. We talk about Tele Meloni these days, which is, of course, a great concern. This growing climate of hostility has led to a significant increase in attacks on media freedom and journalists across the continent. And we have a sort of mapping media freedom project, which is actually financed by the Union, and we are several partners, the EFJ, together with other media freedom, but also civil society organizations, and we are mapping every day all different attacks against journalists. And we are also trying, not only that we put it all down, we're trying to give journalists legal help, but also psychological help in these very difficult times. This last year, there had been about 1,400 attacks. I mean, attacks recorded. I'm sure there were many more, affecting nearly 2,500 individuals and media organizations. This marks a substantial rise from the previous year, which saw around 1,200 attacks. The past year saw an upsurge in verbal assault specifically, which also led to censorship, physical violence on the increase. The attacks came mainly from private individuals and government bodies alike, with the most frequent violations happening online and in the context of protest, specifically in Germany, since we had, because of the AfD, specifically in Eastern Germany, a lot of demonstration against the AfD. There were an unprecedented rise of attacks against journalists, including journalists from public service media. Online attacks included verbal attacks, interference, and attacks on property. Perpetrators of these incidents often remain unknown, contributing to a heightened sense of impunity. So on the other hand, over half of the attacks during protests were physical, with 41% resulting in injury. Violations were recorded during protests in Georgia, Serbia, Turkey, Germany, among other places.
Incidents included pressures, excessive use of force, both by police and private individuals, demonstrating that protecting both the freedom of expression and freedom of assembly is crucial for safeguarding our democracy, but is at stake. The so-called super election year was marked by numerous national and regional elections around Europe, as we all know. And these elections laid bare growing political polarization across Europe, I guess not a surprise to you either. And also there, many journalists facing increased attacks when covering the elections. There has also been an increase in foreign agent laws, which seek to curb independent media and civil society organizations under the pretext of combating foreign influence, have raised growing concern for media freedom organizations. Georgia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and I think yesterday Slovakia adopted such laws, while Bulgaria, Turkey, Moldova, Hungary have seriously considered their adoption. News of spyware and targeted surveillance of journalists have also shaken the media several times in the past year. I just mentioned this morning the case of Italy, where we had Italian journalist of the media fun page who was spied and actually informed by WhatsApp that he was spied by Predator. And a few days later, another journalist who was also spied, and he was informed by Meta. When asking the government what happened, who is behind, nobody knows. And at the same time, we are now just adopting a European Media Freedom Act, which includes Article 4, protection of sources and protection of spyware. And it literally says that spyware is not allowed, only in cases, very reduced cases regarding public interest and with prior judicial approval, and journalists have to be informed when spyware is being used. We have had examples similar in Cyprus. Actually, the country, the government of Cyprus is adopting now a new law to allow surveillance against journalists under the pretext of the European Media Freedom Act. So it's double speech we are starting to have here. And we only hope that the European Commission and the European Parliament will take it seriously and take this enforcement problem seriously, because I'm afraid that specifically everything surrounding digital surveillance is on the increase. We are living in times where governments are frenetic to get information, and they use or misuse journalists to get information, and thereby violating protection of sources, which is paramount for press freedom, as you all know. But I can go on and on, but I don't want to, just two more things before I come to some solutions, because I think that's important to discuss here. Impunity is a big problem, and we all know that we had at least 159 journalists killed in Gaza. This has never happened before in the history, I think. And we don't hear enough outcry on this incredible part of the history. We also had about 15 journalists killed in Russia. You probably have heard only last week a young Ukrainian journalist was killed and tortured before, and the media freedom representative of the OSCE wrote a letter to Russia saying that, you know, this is against international law, and the Russian responded only by saying, this is not your business and you cannot say these things. So yeah, here we are. So impunity is very important, and even within the EU, we had several journalists, Jan Kuciak from Slovakia, Daphne Caruana Galizia, and others who have been killed, and the masterminds are still not found. And we are ringing and banging day by day, because without finding the masterminds of murders, they will continue because they think they can do it. Over the past year, also environmental reporting, and I think it's very important to mention that because we are in a climate crisis, has become increasingly dangerous, with around 40 cases affecting nearly 60 journalists recorded. These journalists face threats and obstruction while covering issues such as natural disasters, waste management, mining, pollution. Examples include journalists reporting on the aftermath of the Dana storm in Spain, as well as those targeted with legal threats or defamation by private companies or politicians for reporting on waste management, mining, or pollution. We talked already at the beginning of the importance of creating a legal environment for journalists, and the EU has been leading on that with the different legislations I think were already discussed here this morning, and we here in Brussels are doing everything that this legislation becomes lively and it's also known, because we need also pressure at national level of that. We at the moment, the European Commission is working on its next budget for the next 7 years, and there we will not get US aid funds back, but we are trying to get something for independent media, for collaborative journalism, for investigative journalism, but also for capacity building of unions and journalist organizations, because they are the ones who are there to support and help journalists, of continuing the monitoring and the legal aid, but also of training regarding digital safety and all that. So there is a lot needed, which is not directly putting input into the media, but as you said, one of the main challenges probably today is the lack of sustainability of journalism as a public good or public interest journalism. And we can say we have to get rid of big tech, but unfortunately it's not as easy as such. So some are talking about European digital infrastructure that is more based on transparency and fundamental rights, but it's very difficult, and I don't know if it's already too late or if we will get there. But at least also to raise awareness exactly on what you said, that nothing is free, and we have to be really careful when we are on the social networks to not give out our data. And of course, media literacy is always something that is extremely important to distinguish what there is and what is journalism and why journalism is so important. We need journalism, and journalism is expensive, that takes advantage of all these technological solutions also, of innovative ways, of new ways of storytelling, of engaging with the young and the public. There is so much out there, and there are excellent journalists, and but we need also the political will to make that happen. We have to do cooperation with academics, with civil society. We have to create safety hubs in which journalists can exchange with academics, but also with enforcement people, with police, with unions, with civil society, what they need most to feel safe to do their work, because without feeling safe, it's very difficult to do that. We are, and we have to continue to help media in exile, because they are a very important voice also for telling the truth from countries like Belarus and Russia, but Egypt is another example, and unfortunately Turkey. Our vice president is from Turkey, and we just got an editorial into Le Monde. It's very, very difficult to discuss that within the European Union, because we feel they're not getting it, and geopolitical issues seem to be more important than Turkey becoming completely autocratic. So yeah, this is all not easy, but we need everybody to support journalism. We also need people to support journalism by paying for it. I think we lost a lot when there was no payroll, and people are used to not paying for information, which I understand, but I see it from my children. I think they wouldn't pay for journalism, but without that, we won't do it. You talk about subscription, and it is great, but yeah, we have to think about all kinds of different ways how to support this very important pillar of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renata. Our fourth speaker will be Lailuma Sadid. Ms. Sadid is a journalist and former Afghan diplomat who has spent over 25 years fighting for women's rights. After surviving Taliban violence, she continues to be a powerful voice for Afghan women in exile. She writes for Engagé and Brussels Morning, mentors students at ULB, and leads the network of Afghanistan diaspora organizations in Europe. In this panel, she will speak on press freedom and the struggle of women journalists in Afghanistan. Please.
Thank you very much, and it's an honor to be here and talk about press freedom. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on a matter that is not just deeply personal, but profoundly urgent: the perilous state of press freedom in Afghanistan and the extraordinary struggle of women journalists under one of the world's most oppressive regimes. Since the Taliban's return to power in August 2021, Afghanistan has become one of the most dangerous places on earth to be a journalist, especially women. The press freedom, or the free press, once a symbol of the democracy or fragile democracy of our country, became systematically dismantled. Before 2021, more or less 400 media and outlets worked and operated all over Afghanistan. But unfortunately, after the attacks or after the collapse of Afghanistan, more than 250 media outlets shut down by this terrorist group in Afghanistan. Before the collapse, more than 12,000 persons worked with the media on Afghanistan. And after that, 8,500 persons that worked with the media, they lost their jobs. It is really unacceptable to see some of them hiding, flee, or change even their profession. But that's very sad to hear. 85% are women in this situation, a woman like me. In 2024, Afghanistan ranked 178 out of 180 countries in the Reporters of Without Borders Press Freedom Inbox. It means that we are really at the end, because there is no press freedom at all in Afghanistan. Independent journalism is fading, and for women, those who once bravely held the microphone, who told the stories that matters, their voice are being forcibly silenced. Let me be clear, this is not just censorship, it is an erasure, especially women in media. It's always so difficult to talk about women and see the situation the women are facing in that country. They are facing in the threat, harassment, abused, violence, prison, even forced married, and also forced to exiled, simply because they are doing their job. That is really ridiculous to hear that. Many are beaten, many are detained for reporting on women's rights protests or covering the subject that saying the truth about the woman that happened in that country. Others are all told to stay home, forbidden from working, speaking, or even appearing on a screen. Also, the voice of women is banned on the TVs. And now the image, the human image is banned in the TVs. So you can imagine a country without television, most of the population are illiterated, they cannot read the news, even if it's not exist free media there. So if there is no image, it is so difficult to say and talk there is free media in Afghanistan. That's not exist there. Even they are erased from the society. Brave women journalists are resisting, some from within the country in secret and many from exile, using every platform they can to tell the world that is happening in Afghanistan and this is the reality. But unfortunately, mostly the world, especially United Nations, even the place that we are living today, European Union, they are not hearing, not seeing the truth that happened on that country. Sometimes the people, as a journalist, when I talk with them through by social media, they say that, come on, the world is blind. They cannot hear us. They cannot see us. They always ask me to put this question and ask, even we are exist, we are human, where is the value of the European Union? Where is the value of the international, let's say, democracy? We are not exist anymore. And so that is really so dangerous to see what is going on. I am here today as one voice among many of speak on behalf of those who can no longer speak freely, on behalf of my colleagues, journalists, is hiding, on behalf of women who were once told stories and are now they are being in a story themselves. We must not allow the light of journalism to be extinguished in Afghanistan, and we should support them. International solidarity is not a luxury. It is a lifeline. We need safe pathway for at-risk journalists. We need support also for the exiled media and journalists that they forced to leave their country. As my colleague said, we are not victims. We left our country to save ourselves, but we are with the experience of journalists working years in our country, outside, inside, but sometimes it is so difficult to work as a journalist. With my 18 years experience at the media in Belgium, I couldn't find a job to work as a journalist. I have my diploma, experience studying at the ULB. I take my master. So when it's so difficult to talk about that anyway. But we need, as you say, that we need to support the exiled journalists also. Engage one of the organization in Belgium that support exiled journalists. We are more or less like 100 journalists registered there from not only 1 or 2 countries, 24 countries. We have like an online magazine. Mostly we are working free. Why? Because I love to keep my identity as a journalist, to show that, okay, I can. Doesn't matter they paid me or not, but I find some other way to feed my families, to work here, to keep my identity is the most important for me. So I hope that your organization can help also engage, because we are part of that and should work in this direction. Journalism is not a crime, we say it always. We need to support. And being a woman should never be a death sentence for telling the truth. Let us remember this. When women are silenced, societies suffer. When journalists are threatened, democracy falters. And this is the most important. But when we come together to defend each other, especially for the press freedom, we can support together greater and never going pushback. That's the most important, to stay and support each other. And then the right to thought, the right to speak, and the right to be heard. Not only recognition, but at least to hear. Keep in mind that engagement with the terrorist group like the Taliban, it's making again another mistake to put the people of Afghanistan in the way that we never imagined. 25 years ago, the first time when the Taliban took power in Afghanistan, I was a student. Like today, they ban everything. I created a secret class for girls in my room, in my house. They beaten me twice and threatened me to death if I do not stop. From that time, I stand for our right to defend the right of women. Fortunately, the regime was changed, everything became in a good way, and again, the same mistake, we went back. Now, where is the woman? Where is the journalist? Where is the press freedom on that country? You talked about all the European countries. Sometimes it's better to keep your eyes open to look at other countries. Sorry to say that, but if you are not supporting us, who can support us? The Taliban? Never. But please, put in your agenda and talk about press freedom, especially in Afghanistan. If world is making engagement with the Taliban, the media and press freedom is disappear from that country. They are not respecting anyone. Few media and outlets are working in Afghanistan. This is just make a propaganda for this terrorist group, for the Taliban. How that country is running without press freedom, without liberty, without women are being involved in everything. I think this is the time we should, everyone, we should stand together to support and defend press freedom, not only in Europe, all over the world. And Afghanistan should be one of that countries. If there is any question later, I will talk. Otherwise, I will talk a lot because I feel that this is the time to talk, but I will not take in so much time, but thanks for organizing this. And I hope for next year, at least we have a chance, the journalists in Afghanistan, especially women, can talk freely what they want, what they are covering. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Layluma. And our last, but not the least, speaker is Abdullah Bozkurt. Abdullah Bozkurt is a Swedish-based investigative journalist and analyst who works as chairman of Stockholm Center for Freedom. He previously worked as a journalist in New York, Washington, Istanbul, and Ankara. He will be speaking on government crackdown on media in Turkey. Please.
Thank you, Selcuk. Thank you for the others for organizing this valuable conference. It's really sad to hear your story from Afghanistan. I've been there many times before 2021, And I saw with my own eyes, very vibrant, very diversified, very much independent media, despite all the shortcomings and the challenges. But I'm not sure whether Taliban or the Erdogan has been competing with each other in their crackdown on the critical, independent media. But I was one of those sad stories from Turkey as well. I used to work for the largest national newspaper in Turkey called Zaman. When we started publishing a major corruption expose for the Erdogan family members, then as Trump has been doing now in the United States, calling the fake media, the mainstream, attacking the mainstream media, Erdogan did the same. He was going out to the public rallies and calling the people, these are the fake news, fake media, don't buy their newspaper, and putting pressure on the advertisers not to put the advertisement in terms of cutting the revenue. But it didn't really budge the newspaper. Yes, we lost a lot of advertising revenue because the corporate sector was very much concerned, but the subscription base for the newspaper was very strong at the time. In fact, it actually increased to 1.2 million people, so we survived, and Erdogan changed the tactic. He fabricated a legal case to take over the company, which he did 2 years later. But the readers reacted by completely stopping buying the newspaper because it became a government mouthpiece newspaper. In a week, the 1.2 million paid subscribers, they simply vanished. So what they did, instead of continuing the newspaper as a propagandist outlet, they shut it down. But that didn't stop President Erdogan. They fabricated a false flag coup operation in 2016, and using that as a pretext, they started shutting down almost 200 media outlets on a single day, starting arresting hundreds of the journalists and putting them in prison. So many were forced to flee the country, like myself. I landed in Sweden, one of the best countries in terms of protection in the press freedom, which goes back like 250 years, very old law, still very strong. So I was lucky in that sense. Not many exiled journalists are lucky enough to continue their profession, even if they manage to move into exile because of the financial challenges, because of harassment, because of very credible threats, including against their lives. So they simply stop, doing journalism work. They move to other areas. The statistics are very, very, very low, unfortunately. So that's why I think we need a support, not only from professional organizations like NGOs, also European Federation of the Journalists and CPJ and many others. Not just, by the way, in financial support. It's a moral encouragement we also need very much in this profession. I was attacked in Sweden 4 years ago in front of my house because of my critical reporting of the Turkish government. I suspect they sent some of their thugs and proxies to send a message, but I didn't give up. But at the time, I realized something at the personal level. The statement that was put out in terms of solidarity on my behalf by the Swedish Journalists Union, which I am a member, and then picked up by the European Federation of the Journalists. They escalated the case to Council of the Europe, put it on media alert. I realized at that moment that is absolutely crucial and valuable. You cannot put a price on it. Because at that moment, you struggle yourself whether you actually continue with their profession or not, because not only yourself, but also your family members are exposed to that kind of threats, and you experience that, firsthand. But when you see that those statements, phone calls, messages, and emails from professional organizations like EFJ, CPJ, and others, that was very valuable for me. And the Turkish government really pay attention what those organizations say. I know very well they have been for years, the Turkish government, trying to shut down the Council of Europe media platform. Their MPs in the Council of Europe, in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, they put out a couple of proposals several times to make that platform shut down so nobody pays attention to what's going on in Turkey in terms of crackdown on the press. So again, that's very valuable input. We need to keep doing it. That also means the governments like Turkish government and others, they really pay attention to what we say, to what we write, to what we do. Otherwise, they just simply ignore it. They don't do it. So I established not only Stockholm Center of Freedom as an advocacy group in Sweden, as Selcuk mentioned, but that was a different hat. But my passion lies on the investigative journalism, so I set up an investigative journalist website, Nordic Monitor, in Sweden in 2019. And during the negotiation of the Sweden and the Finland membership with the NATO, Erdogan government seized the opportunity to put a demand on the table asking the Swedish government to shut down my investigative website. They said, otherwise we will not approve your membership. But Sweden didn't budge, and the Americans came in the picture, put some pressure, and eventually they approved it. But that shows the governments like Erdogan government and others, they come at you with everything they got. They abuse the international mechanism which are designed for something else. They abuse the Interpol mechanism, for example, and diffuse system to put out an arrest warrant against you. They abuse the mutual judicial assistance programs, asking extradition from your exiled country, or at least temporarily put them in prison. That's what they've been asking, until the investigation gets finalized, so they can send an intimidation message to other journalists. So these kind of abusive tactics they employ, and they're going to continue doing so. And that also goes to the financial challenges we face. My picture is next to the notorious Al-Qaeda and ISIS figure and the Turkish government interior ministry website, and that data gets disseminated, distributed with other financial organizations across the world. So they corrupt the financial intelligence data, mix your name, investigative journalist name, with the known notorious terrorist groups. So they are hoping that your bank or your financial institution, they can act on that information, which actually happened in my, several of my colleagues' case. Some of them in the United States live in exile. Their PayPal account or their crowdfunding account sources, they were shut down because of that corrupted financial intelligence data. So there's a lot of means and the tools they can use to come after you, but we are not gonna give up. So we're gonna keep doing our job. Otherwise, if we stop doing it, then they're gonna move to the next target. With the support of a professional organization like European Federation of the Journalists or National Journalists Federation, National Union Journalists Association, and the diaspora groups like others is also established in the diaspora groups in the Turkish community, which are opposed to the Erdogan government's wrongdoings and the crackdown on the fundamental rights and the freedom. So we need that collaboration. And we can continue our profession despite all the challenges we face and the field. So with that, I will stop here. Perhaps we can expand further in the Q&A session if we have time, of course.
Thank you very much, Abdullah. It was a very interesting presentation. I now open the floor for questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and introduce yourself and to whom you ask your question. Yes, please.
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Carr. Yeah. I don't have your business model. It ensures independence for your media outlet, but at the same time, does it limit your ability to reach more audience?
Yeah, that's true. We have about 6,000 subscriptions and maybe 2,000 for the magazine, so that's a limited audience. Through our newsletters and social media, we reach much more, many more people, in 30,000, but of course they have to pay to read the articles. We have a paywall that is not so hard. You can have a month free subscription, etc. But yeah, we choose the model because otherwise we would be forced to or accept publicity. In principle we don't do that, or we have to look for financing through grants and subsidies. Now in Belgium, the system of grant giving is very limited. There are not a lot of foundations, not a lot of organizations that fund journalism, or that, like in Holland, it's much in the United States, where all the free. We also, if you give money to Apache, you cannot deduct the gift from your taxes. There's not. So that's in Belgium. There is another culture on that. So it's an option to go to our readers and ask them to pay more so that we can open the paywall. And maybe we will do that in the future. We have the German example, Correctiv. They gather 7 million in gifts every year, which is wonderful. And they started out with a big, huge grant in the beginning. They had 1 million, I think even more. Also, the correspondent in Holland did the same thing. So it's a dilemma, but I think we should really make sure that the structure, the financial structure, the corporation that is the editor of Apache is sound and solid. Otherwise, we are very, very vulnerable. And I only have to look for 10 to 20% of our money in grants and subsidies, but a lot of my time goes into that. And I'm a journalist, I'm an editor-in-chief. I shouldn't be running around begging for money everywhere, which I do much in too many hours a day. But still, it gives me comfort to know that, like my colleague from Mediapart always says, that only our readers can buy us. And that's a very soothing, it's a very interesting idea. But of course, the problem is also there is a lot of competition in the media. There's a lot of jealousy in the media. If we have an interesting investigation, a scoop or something that is really important, it's not an automatism that other newspapers or other media outlets take over the news and even refer to Apache. Maybe sometimes they even steal the news and publish it 3 weeks later as if they have invented it themselves. In Holland, it's much more easier. Our colleagues from Follow the Money, which is also a very, very good platform, they have, I think, over 30,000 subscriptions. They get access to mainstream media with their investigations much easier than we can. And that's also linked to a slap case. I had to go to court for 7 years to defend ourselves against a lawsuit from a corrupt real estate mafioso, if I could call him that way. And as long as these judicial procedures were going on, we were considered also by mainstream media, but also by politicians and, let's say, society in a whole in Flanders, as maybe there's something true about what this guy is saying. So as long as we didn't went through all the judicial system, we went to the Court of Cassation, which is the highest judicial instance in Belgium. After 7 years, we won every case against us, and at the end of the road, I even got 5,000 euros in damages, which is of course peanuts compared to the lawyer cost we had to pay. But as long as these judicial trial, these judicial procedures took, I was in some sort of a freezer. If I went to receptions, people didn't stand next to me because they think maybe that's this criminal journalist doing all these things that we did an undercover piece with a video we filmed and that was considered that we were spies, we're spying on people. And now it's 2 years since we won all these legal cases, and now I see that people are relaxing and that they embrace what we do much more. But that's one of the key issues. People in power, people who are under scrutiny by investigative journalism, the first thing they do is file a complaint against you, and there is the goods because of we were at the basis of the European rules against SLAP, because we were followed by private detectives, which was also outrageous. Now there is a law in Belgium that doesn't allow private detectives to follow journalists anymore. But also the measurement, the European Parliament asks the member states to adopt legislation on SLAP. Belgium there's a proposal now in Parliament, which is very good. But it becomes worse and worse. Yesterday I had this complaint of a guy, of a lawyer representing somebody whose name was mentioned in an article, and we already published the reaction of that guy under the article the day after it was published, but he wants us to remove the entire article, and we refuse, of course. And now he's asking 5,000 euros in damages, even before he files a complaint, which is the first time I had this. So if we don't pay 5,000 euro, he will file a complaint. Now I'm filing a complaint against him. That's the only thing I can do. It's terrible, and it's becoming worse and worse and worse. We have in Belgium very good laws on media freedom. We have source protection. We have the recht van antwoord, the right for a response, which is in the law. Everybody whose name is mentioned in a newspaper has the right to force the newspaper to publish a reaction. And it can even be longer. The article, the reaction can even be longer than the piece that was written first. But this, which is a strong tool against defamation, etc. If you are mentioned in a newspaper and things that are in the newspaper are wrong, you can rectify it yourselves. But they don't use it. It's not their interest. They want to harass journalists. They want to cripple us. And that's why they don't use the recht van antwoord anymore. And we rarely have them. It's the first, they skip that. They just file a complaint or get a lawyer to write the letter to intimidate us. And for a right of response, you don't need a lawyer. You just have to send it to the news desk, and we are obliged to publish. But no, they even prefer paying a lawyer to write the letter to us and intimidate us, because maybe they think that what has more effect. But it's very sad. Sorry, it was not an answer for your question, but excuse me.
Yes, please go ahead.
We see like the stances of the EU Commission and the EU Parliament on oppressing journalists in Iran, Turkey, Afghanistan, and Russia all the time. But I personally have never seen them condemning the killing of Palestinian journalists in Gaza. So how do you see that stance? How do you interpret that position?
Yeah, it's complicated. I think it may be partly due because the president of the European Commission is German. And you may have heard that there is a special relation between Germany and Israel. I have to say, at the beginning, I also thought there was a lot of censorship in very good German media. I was actually shocked, having lived outside Germany for a long time, and has changed in recent times with the worsening situation in Gaza. I have to say that as well. But yeah, you're right, and we're all quite shocked by that. I also feel that lately the European Commission has criticized less Turkey, for example. They need Turkey regarding refugees, and they need Turkey because Turkey is in NATO. So this is what I said at some point. Geopolitical interests seem to be coming first to fundamental rights. Having said that, it doesn't mean the whole European Union is like that. We have a new commission now. The Commissioner McGrath, who's responsible for democracy and human rights, he's from Ireland, and from the few times I heard him, he is very good. He will also be responsible for the European Media Freedom Act, for protection of journalists, for fundamental rights, for the digital shield. So we have hope in him. But as the European Union, the Commission is how it is struck now under von der Leyen, it will be more difficult. We also face a European Parliament that is very different. Before the European Parliament, whatever happened, they were on the side of journalists. There were a lot of resolutions also condemning member states when they didn't do it well, condemning applicant countries, no matter how important they were. Now we have a European Parliament that is, as you probably all know, much more towards the rights, and the European People's Party is even so saying that they have the famous cordon sanitaire. They are playing. Sometimes they are with the right, sometimes not, and that makes everything more difficult as well. The Polish presidency at the moment, I just had an interview on Press Freedom Day with a Polish journalist where I mentioned Gaza, and she said, just for your information, this part we will cut out. Because she told me on Press Freedom Day. I thought that was quite interesting.
Self-censor or?
Yeah, I mean, at least she was honest. She said, personally, I completely am for you, but so just that you know. Yeah, this is the situation.
Thank you. Any more? Yes, please.
Yeah, I have two questions. First is for Mr. Carl. Actually, you mentioned the danger of monopolization in the for the press media, but you mentioned some rules. But what's the society's role for the prevent monopolization? You mentioned subscription could be a way, but in a capitalist society, also monopoly is merit from the situation. So, but would you recommend for the, as a media consumer, what could be the our role for this?
I don't understand the question.
Actually, what could be the our role for the, as a media consumer?
Oh yeah. Well, I think I cannot tell you what to watch or what to read or what to listen to, but of course, if you want to be a citizen who wants to take sound decisions about the world, I think you will look for solid information. We were very surprised during the Corona crisis that we doubled our subscriptions because people want to be informed by trustworthy outlets. They didn't. The things they get on popular media or on social media confused them and made them scared. So they wanted, and I think what we're seeing now also, you saw it last time when Trump was president the first time, the subscription of the New York Times went through the roof because people wanted to be informed. So that makes me hopeful that people are still willing to pay for good, solid journalism. On the other hand, governments can do other things than just give subsidies to newspapers. They can give reading vouchers. They can give everybody a tax reduction on a subscription for a newspaper. There's a lot of ways that are not intrusive and don't hamper journalists' independence. But there's also this risk if you take money from somebody that you have to write what he or she wants you to write. So if you get subsidies from the state, maybe, and it's also only a good thing in countries where the state is friendly for journalism, you can't ask in Afghanistan, I don't want money from the Afghanistan government, so I would refuse it. But it's, I think we should look for creative ways to what we are doing, which it's experiment because we're an online medium, but we have a paywall, so we have to have a password and a login to get in. But if we sell at VUB a subscription, a bulk subscription that everybody who logs into the Wi-Fi network of VUB can read Apache. We have that sort of service that we provide. You can also do it in the Belgian Parliament. They have a subscription that if you go into the Parliament, you can read Apache. So, and there, it's like, yeah, it's a third party who pays, who reads. We are the first party, we write, you are the second, and you read, but there is another party that pays for the consumption. And I think we should experiment with that, but I truly believe that people are willing to give money to independent journalism that they even consider it as being a good cause, like they give money to Greenpeace or like Doctors Without Borders. We have many more subscribers than readers, which is silly. They pay for a subscription, but in fact they're just giving us money to support us. And we see that maybe 20% of our subscribers never use the password. So they just want to support us. So there's also the thing we have to explore. Maybe we could tap into these resources and maybe open up the paywall, and on some occasions maybe. But it's very difficult. It's in Belgium and Flanders, it's very small. We only have 5 million, 6 million people. So to break it, to make a PASH in Germany or in an English-speaking country, it's much more easy. You can have a critical. We need 1 million euros to function, which is not a lot, but we have 8 or 9 people. But we want to go a bit. We want to grow a little bit in journalists, but still we don't reach 1 million. It's very difficult to get 1 million out of subscriptions, and that's the sad reality of my job, which I like very much.
You said your second question?
Yeah, I have a second question to Mrs. Renata. Actually, you mentioned the transparency of European media, but we saw that in the case of genocide in Gaza, how European transparency can collapse in some cases, because if you are talking about genocide in Gaza, you don't have that much space to talk about in media or in academia. So we saw that European transparency also can collapse in some cases. So what would you recommend for the further steps? Because we saw some risk in these cases. So what would you recommend for this?
I think I was talking more transparency regarding to media ownership. So it's not the same. Who is behind the media? Is it Murdoch? Is it Springer? Whatever. So I think it's difficult for me to respond to your question on that, because I think it was not the same. I just wanted to add, since I have the micro, regarding Afghanistan. The European Federation of Journalists, its mandate is only to work for journalists in Europe. I mean, exiled journalists who are in Europe are part of it. But we have the umbrella organization, the International Federation of Journalists, and it's their job to help journalists in Afghanistan, to help journalists in Palestine and all that. Because otherwise, we are already very limited staff. We would need, unfortunately, we have more and more work, but we have this division of work. Otherwise, it just wouldn't work. So whatever, I don't know if you know the colleagues at the IFJ, but they are the ones who are dealing with the rest of the world, and we are dealing with Europe.
Can I ask a question to?
Please, yes. Go ahead.
Let me just pick up on that. You said your responsibility area is Europe, right? So we have, there are a lot of journalists living in exile in Europe, from Turkey and from other countries as well. Since 2023, actually it started before the election cycle in Turkey, big tech companies like X, social media companies, started taking the government takedown orders very seriously and started to block, restrict access to certain journalist accounts. This means everything for exiled journalists, because online platforms are everything. That's where people go. When you have national broadcasters censored and you have limited resources, what you can do is start a YouTube channel or an X page and report there. And we will have very limited accountability with these big tech companies. They just, to continue business in Turkey and other places, they just take down their accounts and continue business as usual. But Europe needs to have some leverage on these companies in the sense that you have privacy laws that you can enforce on these companies, other things that you don't have anywhere else in the world, but in Europe you enforce them. Don't you think there's more to be done about media freedom in big tech and how you can enforce European Media Freedom Act on these cases?
You're absolutely right, and we heard about what's happening in Turkey also now after the mayor in Istanbul got into prison. I think Google Alphabet even stopped all search possibility for independent critical media, which is outrageous indeed. This is not the European Media Freedom Act, this is the Digital Services Act in theory, which is there, because they are dealing with the transparency and the accountability of these very large online platforms, and also with the question of transparency of the algorithms. And yeah, the Commission has started to do its work. They are following also with X, what happened in Germany, what happened with TikTok in Romania, but they are quite slow for now. They promise they're taking it very seriously. We have digital coordinators in all member states. It's a lot of work. We have also been afraid that the Commission may not dare because of the tariffs and what have you. For now, they promise they take it very seriously. But it's very difficult. It's very difficult because we know the incredible monopoly power. We also have the Digital Markets Act, and that is more a question of competition. And we all know when it comes to competition, there is none. Also when it comes to the advertising market and everything, it's all in their hands. So actually one would really have to need to cut up Google and Co. But this will take time and a lot of courage, and it's very difficult. But I can assure you, we and many civil society organizations, digital rights organizations are putting a lot of pressure on the Commission on that. But it needs a lot of work.
Any more questions? I don't, yeah, please.
Question to this issue. There are so many legislation in the European Union. You mentioned anti-slap directive, GSA, and DMA, and privacy regulations. Well, there's an ongoing debate, I guess. The advertising is the main part of the funding opportunity for journalists, but the advertising sector is now relying on personal advertising. But personal advertising contains personal information which is prohibited by privacy laws. Some media sector, some companies argue that if you apply privacy laws strictly, that more strictly, so the journalists will not be able to fund themselves, because advertising sector requires using personal information, privacy laws prohibits using those information. So there is a dilemma. So you should take a position as a director of the federation. What is your position?
First of all, I have to say this is really the work of the publishers' organizations, and they are three. They are dealing with business models. We are more generally speaking supporting viability for journalism as a public good, for public interest journalism, and which is not always, as Carl said, the same with all the media publishers and their big media companies who rely on business models and clickbait and what have you. And we agree with the dilemmas they have. They also tell us, they already asked us if we can support them, but this is not our business. I mean, the publishers have to deal with their business. We are trying to find funding models like the ones which was explained here, journalists for journalists, where we really feel like Media Park, also The Guardian. I mean, we also did a study on new digital startups, and there are so many and a lot of passion behind it, be it constructive journalism, collaborative, slow journalism in all member states. But of course, they're all working under precarious working conditions, and as you said, because they're journalists and it's their vocation and they work for PR at the site. Or they have to look for money while they're being journalism. We have this term entrepreneurial journalist, but it's very difficult to do both actually. So I'm a bit extending your response, but yeah, so that's why as a director of the ERJ, I will not respond on that, because we have data protection laws and they're very important. And I know the publishers suffer, but yeah, this is not our piece of cake.
Thank you. Any other questions? don't see any hands. Maybe I can take the floor. Renata, I want to ask you, we are in Brussels, living in the capital of European Union, and the European Union, we take it for granted, media freedom. But as you mentioned in your speech, there are more than several member countries where media freedom is under threat. Is there a way in the European Union to fight against the erosion of media freedom?
Well, there is a way, and as I told you, the last European Commission did a lot of laws to guarantee media freedom. The European Media Freedom Act was done exactly to protect journalists from undue political mingling, to protect public service media from political mingling, and to allow stable financing and to protect journalist sources, to protect them from spyware. So we have that legal legislation. We have the anti-SLAPP directive. It's not great because it actually is supposed to deal with collaborative work. But what is increasingly lacking, I'm afraid, is the political will. And without the political will, we all know it, it will be very difficult. So, and at the moment, we are at a point where a lot of civil society organizations, and we have great civil society organizations here in Brussels and throughout the Union, but they all depend, just like journalists and journalism, on financing. And we had a discussion yesterday with civil society organizations, and it was actually quite frightening because their funding very often is under threat. That's why this EU budget, the multi-financial framework for the future, is so important for us. And we are working very hard to get MEPs, to get governments, to get the European Union aware of how important journalism, fundamental rights, civil society groups are for our democracies. We were told by the Commission, think of friendly governments within the 26 EU member states. And I got really afraid because I was thinking and thinking and thinking. Now Denmark, maybe Ireland, but I didn't get a handful of friendly governments. Even Germany these days, I'm not sure I'm German, so I'm saying that. I'm not sure anymore. And that's frightening. But not to end up completely negative, we also see a positive effect on Trump. I mean, we've seen it in Canada, we have seen it in Australia. We just had a meeting today with our Norwegian colleagues. They were very afraid that the next will be a very right-wing government, and they said today, thanks to Trump, at the moment, the Social Democrats are rising. And we hope that will happen in other countries as well. Norway is a country which always is #1 when it comes to press freedom. Maybe that helps. So we have to convince also the Social Democrats of this world, which we also had the discussion today. We are sometimes afraid they are also sort of using the rhetoric of the extreme right, not to talk about the Christian Democrats or socialists. So I think this is a challenge to get the sort of mainstream democratic parties not be too afraid of the right-wing movements we have throughout Europe, but to be proud and secure of what they are doing, because we feel they're afraid, they don't know what to do anymore, and they follow very often the autocratic narrative, and that is very dangerous.
Thank you very much, Renata. Abdullah, I want to ask you, you were attacked physically in broad daylight in Stockholm, Sweden. Now I wonder, how do you provide your security? Do you feel safe right now in Sweden?
To some extent, yes, but not really. Yes, I mean, at the same time, you are living in a country which is very transparent. And at the personal level, you also feel to live a normal life and not to expose your family members in a very strict protective environment. So that's a challenge at the personal level, but from the country-wise, yes, they do have some protective measures. They suggest and advise for me, and I comply with that. But you only have certain level of protection. And if the Turkish government, proxy group, or other organized crime syndicates that you write regularly, if they want to decide something about it, it may be very difficult to prevent. So that's the price, I guess, you have to pay for it if you want to keep doing what you love to do most. So it's a challenge. But as I said before, the support from professional organization, not only in terms of putting out the statement, moral encouragement, but also providing tools, digital tools or the physical tools that you can enhance your security at the personal level or your family security, that also quite helpful, because you want to keep focusing on what you do best as an investigative journalism. The expertise at the personal security or the family level, that requires something else. And there are very good professional organizations that actually provide help on that front. So that's how we manage our lives in Sweden. But Sweden is one of the best countries in terms of protection against illegal harassment, as Carl mentioned before. We also face so many different legal challenges, not specifically from the Turkish government. That's easier to deal with it because everybody knows it's a politically motivated and they want to harass you. But there are some frivolous legal suits that you face from corporate actors, some of them based in London, because it's very easy to file a suit in London. But because of the protection of the Swedish legal system, it's not easy to penetrate. So we face those kind of lawsuits, take down requests, not just put some quotes from the person that involved in the story, but they want you to completely get out of the article from your website, and we refuse to do that. So thanks to the strong Press Freedom Act in the Sweden, we managed to face off those frivolous lawsuits coming from different corporate actors or the personal people.
I would say something.
No, I'm censored. I just wanted to add, thanks for saying that, because we actually offer a lot of workshops on training. Also, we have some digital risk assessment. A colleague of mine is dealing with that specifically. And but this is, to be honest, we cannot do it with the fees of our members. This is all EU money, and we very much appreciate it, and we very much hope we will get that in the future. That's why for us this next budget talks are so important, because all these workshops for our affiliates, for the Swedish Union of Journalists, for all of them, are very, very important.
Thank you so very much. We had fascinating presentations. I want to thank two of our speakers, and I invite you to applaud our panel. I understand there will be some gifts to the speakers by the others.
The cash gift, that we need.
And there's an announcement I want to make. Actually, there's another panel at the European Parliament on hate speech. The title is The Effects of Hate Speech on Democracy and Fundamental Rights and Inclusion. It is on 22nd May between 2 and 4. The event is hosted by Belgian MEP Esther Kulemans. So I think we see the QR code now on the screen. So we will have some coffee and cookies outside as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin.
Yeah, it was great.